development. At this delicious Chinese dinner, I was seated beside the one girl of the staff of 22 who was able to speak English. But I found that her English was so mixed up with Chinese that it was quite difficult to understand her. But she turned out to be a lovely girl, but she had a plaintive quality about her. She said, "You know, sir, I hope that sometime I can get to believing that I can handle life. I feel so inept, and I wish that you would pray for me, that I would have self-confidence." And I assured her that I would. A few days later in Calcutta, we were stopping in the Oberoi Grand Hotel, and we went down to the coffee shop for breakfast. There was a table of 4, 3 Westerners I took to be Americans, and 1 Indian man. I noticed them talking among themselves, and finally the Indian man came over to me and addressed me in that gracious way that only the Indian people can affect, where the hands are brought together in such a loving attitude. And he bowed graciously and said he was glad to meet me. And I told him that I was glad to meet him. And he said, "I know you're busy. I will not hold you." But he said, "I have a very great responsibility that means everything to me and the future of my life, and I don't feel equal to it. Will you bless me, and will you pray for me?" And he said, "I mean, bless me now." So I put my hand in the same way, and I said, "Dear Lord, bless this dear friend and give him self-confidence in his responsibility." So it goes everywhere. Now I look out at you this morning, and you all look very composed, very competent, equal to any situation. But you and I know, don't we, that it is the mark of a sophisticated person to dissemble. That is, not to reveal on that outward facade known as the countenance the inner problems and frustrations. And it is a fact that in a deep and pathetic sense, all of us are at times at least, as frightened little children in this great big world with complexities. And we want to know how to stand up to it with confidence. That's what this church has been teaching for centuries to the people of this burgeoning city, of this still growing dynamic nation, that we still have the ancient power among us in the name of God, that we can handle our lives and handle them effectively. How then does one develop real self-confidence? I would say that the first and primary factor is constantly to build up a body of faith in your mind. Ultimately, your mind will always give back what you've given to it. If over a long period of time you give to your mind inferior feelings, inadequacy feelings, self-doubt feelings, you will become of that fashion. But if constantly, on the contrary, you read the Bible, you go to church, you associate with spiritual people, you think spiritually, you pray in depth, you will finally build up into your mind such a power of faith that no matter what crisis may develop, you will be equal to it. And don't you think that crisis will not come to you. We know not the day or the hour, says the Bible. You could go even further and say we know not the minute when some tremendous, overpowering challenge of crisis may come to you. The question is then whether this faith has been built up to such an extent that you have the inner power to meet it and the inner spiritual perceptiveness and wisdom to handle it. For example, there's a friend of ours, a writer, in one of our magazines, who is a buyer in the New York market. She buys for a store, I believe, in Denver, Colorado. And on one of her buying trips to New York, she learned that one of her old schoolmates was living uptown somewhere in the Columbia University section. So she called her up and asked her to come down and have dinner, go to a theater, and have a nice evening together. Apparently there are a couple of talkative ladies, because after the theater was over, they hadn't finished their conversation. They went into a all-night restaurant in the Times Square district to continue their chattering conversation. Presently, to their astonishment, they noticed that the hour was 2 a.m. It required now the girl from uptown to get back to her place up near Columbia University. Phyllis, the girl from Denver, suggested at that hour of the night she should take a taxi because it wouldn't be safe to be on the streets alone. She said, "Oh no, the subway goes right by my house. It's only a step, and I'll take the subway. Will you see me to the subway station?" So the two girls went to the subway station. They went down inside, and trains are irregular at that hour of the night. There were a very few people in the lonely station. And finally the train came along. The one girl got on. They waved at each other. The doors closed. The train disappeared into the tunnel. And now Phyllis was alone in this station where suddenly she realized there was not a single human being. A tremor of anxiety crossed her mind. But she said, "This is in the middle of civilized New York City. I'll be all right." And she headed for the gate, only to find that 5 obviously very tough boys emerged from the shadows, and they lined up between her and the gate. And one of them, with a sneer, said, "You're out pretty late tonight, aren't you, baby?" And another one said, "Would you like a little company, sister?" She froze. She thought of her husband at home with her 2 little children. She thought, "I'll run." But she knew that they would catch her. She said, "I will fight them." But she knew that she would have no chance whatsoever with 5 muscular-looking tough boys. She said, "I will scream." But then she realized that her screams would go unheard in the loneliness of the station. There she stood. And then a thought came to her. A thought out of this book. A thought out of the book you gave me, which says, "I will be a shield and buckler to them that walk uprightly." You see, it came out of her consciousness in which she had put faith for all these years. And she said, "That's it. I will walk tall, like it says." And she proceeded, and then she heard a voice which she recognized finally, strangely, as her own voice. And with firmness it said, "Let me pass, please. Let me pass." She proceeded further towards the boys, who were unmoved. And again, "Let me pass, please. Let me pass." The boys on either end looked at the boy in the middle, who was obviously the leader,